Hello, dear senior two learners. I understand you're doing well. By name, I'm Sendyose from Namgongo Secondary and Vocational School. I'm a teacher of fine art. Today, I'm going to basically take you through drawing. And under drawing, we shall look at shading as our topic. Then we shall look at the subtopic being the techniques used in shading. Let us not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is what you should do. Please subscribe. So, allow me to take you through some of the objectives that we want to achieve by the end of this lesson. I want us to be in position to define the term shading as used in art and craft. Then secondly, I want us to be in position to identify the different techniques used while shading. Then I also want us to be in position to identify some of the elements used in shading. Then lastly, I want us to be in position to identify the importances of shading in either drawing or painting. So having looked at the objectives, allow me proceed to the definition of shading as used in art and craft. Allow me take you through the definition of shading as used in art and craft. We can refer to shading as the technique of adding value to an object by repeating several lines close to each other. That is how we can define the term shading. That is, if you happen to find it anywhere, that is how you should define it. Then, having looked at the definition of the term shading, allow me proceed to the techniques used in shading. Allow me proceed to the techniques used in shading. The first one is hatches. If you don't want to mention the term hatches, we can call them line shading. And how can we define the term hatches? It is simply a technique of shading objects by using lines that run in the same direction, and in most cases they run in a diagonal direction. I will demonstrate to you this sometime to come. Then, having looked at the first one, and that is the hatches, I want us to proceed to the second one, and that is cross hatching, or we can call it cross hatches. This is the technique of shading objects by using lines that run from different directions across each other. These lines cross each other. They are supposed to cross each other. Remember, with the hatches, I told you they run in the same direction. But with the cross hatching, they are supposed to cross each other. So, having looked at that, I want us to proceed to the third, and that is the use of dots, or we can call it stippling. It's a technique of drawing and shading objects by using dots. With this one, we use the dots. That is how we come up with our tone or the shades. We are supposed to use dots. So, having looked at that, allow me proceed to the second last, and that is scribbling. It's not the first time that you're seeing this. In fact, if you don't want to use the term scribbling, we can call them swirls. And with this one, the objects are shaded using doodles. Remember in senior one, when your teachers were introducing you to drawing, they told you that you're supposed to start with doodling. That is what we were doing. But with such a technique, we use it to produce a tone. And in most cases, the things that we shade using this technique, we have an example here, the hair. We can use the technique of swirls to shade the hair, then the clouds, then lastly, we can shade the tree canopies using the swirls or the scribbling technique. Then lastly, we have the technique of blending. If you don't want to use the term blending, we can call it smudging. This is the technique of shading objects by using a very smooth tone. And how is it produced? By rubbing your drawing tool on either a given paper or a drawing pad. That is how you can be in position to apply such a technique. Then, having looked at all those techniques, I want us to proceed to the importance of shading in either drawing or painting. Let me start with the first one, and that is shading adds realism to a drawing or painting. When you leave your work in line work, it appears unreal. But the moment you introduce in your shading, your work will gain value and it will appear real. So that is the importance of shading in drawing or painting. Then secondly, it also gives your work a sense of depth or three-dimensionality. For example, if you're shading a sphere, in normal senses, a sphere appears, looks like a circle which is a shape. But the moment you add some tone or the shading, it will gain its roundness and it will become a form automatically, because you'll be in position to view it from three sides. That's why we are saying that it will help your work to gain a three-dimension format within it. Then lastly, it affects the emotional tone and emphasis of a composition. It affects the emotional tone and emphasis of a composition. So basically, those are the importances of shading to either a painting or a drawing. So having looked at that, I want us to look at some of the illustrations or the demonstrations that we can use to show the different techniques used in shading. And we are going to start with what we started with, and those are the arches. How do arches look like? That is what we are going to basically look at. So we said with arches we use lines, and those lines run following the same direction. So this is what they were trying to mean. So you're supposed to produce your tone using such lines. But as you're using them, let us not forget that you have to be following where the light is coming from. You have to consider that very much. You have to consider the source of light. So these are the hatches. These are the hatches. Then with the cross hatches, we say these are lines that run in different directions. They run in different directions. So this is what we shall have as our cross hatches. Then with the stippling, I say, with the stippling we use dots. With the stippling we are supposed to use, with the stippling produce a tone, or we are supposed to shade using dots. We can refer to these ones as scribbles. Then the second last is the swirls. The second last are the swirls. The swirls, we can refer to them as doodles. We can refer to them as doodles. We can refer to them as doodles. And this is how they are supposed to. This is how they are supposed to appear. And we are supposed to use these swirls to produce our tone. Then lastly, we have the technique of blending. Remember I told you that when we are coming up, we are using this technique. In most cases, we are supposed to rub our drawing tool. This is my drawing tool. You're supposed to rub it on a piece of paper or a drawing pad. A drawing pad. And let me try to demonstrate it here. You're supposed to rub that drawing tool on a piece of paper. So this is how you're supposed to use that blending technique. So having looked at that, allow me to remind you to subscribe on our YouTube channel. Still by name, I'm called Sendyose.